I better not catch you picking up litter or planting a tree. Take that bag of trash and throw it right back in the lake. Find an old washing machine and go dump it in the forest. Grab your old car batteries and toss them straight in the ocean. Because if you care about the environment, if you're concerned with conservationism and protecting nature for future generations, you're probably a racist. You and your contractor bags full of trash you picked up are really weapons of white supremacist terror, such as the claim being made by our friend Cory Doctorow on his website boingboing.net, as reported by Breitbart News. Cory Doctorow, someone who has done good work with the Electronic Frontier Foundation and written some decent science fiction books, is the man responsible for this article. Quote, "Eco-Fascism isn't new. White supremacy and exterminism have always lurked in the environmental movement. I can't wait to hear about how people that want to preserve biodiversity and the sanctity of nature are really, actually, exterminationist genocidal maniacs. This one ought to be good. As you may have known from following my Instagram, rest in peace, in my spare time I enjoy getting out in nature, whether that's hiking, camping, or, my personal favorite, off-roading and overlanding. At least once a month I hit the trails, usually with a group, and engage in trash cleanup along the way. Not to engage in a hashtag humble brag, but screw it, I'll do it anyways. Just last week I went off-roading at the ORV park in Moses Lake, Washington, and we picked up trash and cleaned up trails and did all that kind of stuff. You know, perhaps that's why my Instagram got shut down. That's why they claimed my account was a dangerous individual. They didn't want me going out and radicalizing the youth into doing trail cleanups. Doctorow argues that in order to save the planet, every human on Earth must toil forever to build seawalls and welcome refugees. No, really, that's his solution. And the people proposing solutions that would realistically help preserve nature and reduce America's environmental impact, things like closing our borders and not subsidizing unsustainable population growth across the third world, those people are really just racist exterminationists. Doctorow argues the nonsensical point that we can save our environment and welcome in the world, a point I don't exactly agree with. We will answer his anti-conservationist, anti-racist blog post and talk about why right-wing or nationalist environmentalism is so concerning to the left. It undermines their position of really unpalatable, unpopular left-wing environmentalism. But first, they cannot protect a sea turtle from a plastic six-pack rack, but they can protect you online. It's my friends at Virtual Shield. It's the current year, and if you aren't using a VPN by now on your desktop, tablet, or mobile device while you browse the internet, you are exposing yourself to a lot of potential danger. I personally recommend Virtual Shield because it's the easiest, fastest, and most secure VPN on the market. They don't store browsing logs, and I trust them with my security. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. This month, Virtual Shield is offering a back-to-school celebration special of 20% off all VPN plans and all premium add-ons, including Protection Plus, residential access, monthly maintenance, phone support, and VIP performance, all for as low as $3.99 a month. Total privacy for the price of a coffee. Go to virtualshield.com/allsup for 20% off. Get your free 30-day trial to Virtual Shield and see what the hype is about. Check them out today. I'll be clear from the start. I oppose mass migration and foreign aid for a variety of reasons, which all circle back to the fact that neither program is good for Americans, the people already here. That's all true, but immigration and foreign aid are not good for the national or global environment either. Simply put, more people tends to equal more pollution and more resource consumption. As cities and suburbs sprawl outwards, green spaces are destroyed, forests cut down, hillsides leveled, habitats destroyed, to make space for roads and buildings and businesses. I understand that some economic growth is good. I'm not an extremist on either side here. We should balance preserving the environment with economic interests, obviously. The United States is allowing in almost 1 million legal immigrants every year, not counting those that stay here illegally through visa overstays or cross the southern border illegally. Factor in deaths and birth rates, and our population is growing by millions every single year. And that housing has to be built somewhere. Additionally, many people coming to the U.S. are bringing their home country's attitudes towards environmentalism with them. Consider, for example, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Population 8.9 million. The streets and waterways are commonly filled with garbage, prompting concerns during the 2016 Olympics that swimmers may in fact be swimming in feces-contaminated water. Tokyo, Japan, by contrast, population 9.2 million, one of the remarkably cleanest cities I've ever been to, even in the, quote, bad areas. Osaka, population 3 million. Even Nagasaki, a city that got hit with a nuclear bomb just 70 years ago, is cleaner and nicer than Los Angeles. The point is that different nations and peoples have different practices when it comes to managing garbage and waste. Some people find high-tech ways to dispose or recycle. Other people just throw it in the street. It's a matter of culture agricultural practice? What do you think will happen to the streets in your town if you import people that have grown up seeing the sidewalk as a dumpster? According to Cory Doctorow, this very pragmatic observation makes me an eco-fascist, bad person, evil man. Choke out that sea turtle or you are literally Hitler. Here's his blog post, quote, "It's easy to think of climate denial as a right-wing phenomenon, but a growing and ultra-violent strain of white nationalism also embraces climate science in the worst way possible. Several of the recent white nationalist mass killers have described themselves as eco-fascists," citation needed, by the way, and or have deployed eco-fascist rhetoric in their manifestos. The short version of Eco-Fascism is that it's the belief that our planet has a carrying capacity that has been exceeded by humans alive today, and we must embrace degrowth in the form of mass extermination of billions of humans in order to reduce our population to a sustainable level. End quote. I can't speak for anyone that commits violent action. That is something I would never endorse and unilaterally condemn. Got that, Think Progress? Got that, Mr. Michelle over at Think Progress? But I'm curious about Doctorow's language here and characterization of all right-wing environmentalism as necessitating mass extermination. Again, I don't identify with eco-fascism or anything like that, but I do identify as an American nationalist and as a conservationist or environmentalist. As an American nationalist and conservationist, I would never argue for violence. My solution is first, number one, close the borders and stop importing more people that will add to the U.S.'s pollution problem and energy consumption problem. If you want gross national emissions and pollution to go down, having fewer people consuming product and generating emissions would be a good start. Second, we encourage a cultural shift away from consumerism. The consumption-destruction cycle produces a lot of waste, wrappers, garbage, materials that end up in landfills. Third, we end foreign aid that subsidizes population growth in foreign countries. Leave people to their own devices. Let their populations rise and fall on their own accord. The idea that elites are deeply concerned with carbon emissions while demanding we subsidize exponential population growth in Africa is ridiculous on its face. Fourth, open up more public lands for public use. Nothing about a nationalist environmentalist platform has to be violent. That's just a false assertion. In fact, I think that platform would be appealing to almost everybody in America, left and right. Let's keep reading. In some ways, eco-fascism is just a manifestation of peak indifference, the idea that denial eventually self-corrects, as the debt built up by a refusal to pay attention to a real problem mounts and mounts, until it can no longer be denied. Eventually, the wildfires, floods, diseases, and ensuing refugee crises overcome all but the most dedicated forms of bad faith, motivated reasoning, and self-deception, and people start to switch sides, from denying science to embracing it. He's not entirely wrong about this, actually. Many people that do care about the environment, people like me, are put off by the garbage tier, Al Gore, inconvenient truth, the planet will literally catch fire tomorrow if you don't stop driving your car and eating steak style alarmism. Like, I care about the environment, guy, but I'm not going to give up beef and internal combustion. Again, I speak only for myself, but as an environmentalist and a nationalist, I want my country to take pragmatic steps to make our national and global environments better, while recognizing the limits of U.S. action. If we instituted a carbon tax or phased out internal combustion by 2030, it wouldn't make a global difference. As the Indian and Chinese middle classes grow by millions of members every day, these people are foregoing their bicycles for motorcycles and passenger cars, not to mention the lax pollution standards for factories. We cannot reverse global emissions unless China and India seriously hamstring themselves, which will never happen. So let's focus on what we can do. Things like clean air in the U.S., clean public lands, and safe water. Eco-fascism is a form of nihilism, one that holds that it's easier to murder half the people on Earth than it is to reform our industrial practices to make our population sustainable. Leaving aside the obvious moral objections to this posture, there's also an important technical sense in which it is very wrong. We will need every mind and every body our species have to toil for generations to come, building seawalls, accommodating refugees, treating pandemic sufferers, working in more labor-intensive and less resource-intensive forms of agriculture, etc., etc. Cory seems to be rebutting his own artificially constructed manifesto of a Twitter skull mask-wearing poster. This idea of genocide is the strawest of men.
We go to bed, you doze off, so I take your country girl clothes off. I put my hands on your body, it feels like, hey, it's a fucking scarecrow again.
Then there's his idea that humanity will be saved via a neo-Luddite agricultural revolution and open borders for all. In what world would that make any sense? Again, how many thousands of combine harvesters and tractors pulling grain wagons would you have to run before you equaled the emissions of one Chinese plastics plant? Hamstringing U.S. industry, or pursuing this Maoist fantasy of sending bespectacled office workers to the fields to swing a scythe, it's a fool's errand. And suddenly, in Dr. O's analysis, overpopulation is no longer a problem. In fact, welcoming refugees from overpopulated countries becomes part of our Western burden. If you believe that climate change is caused by CO2 emissions, fair enough. But given that China expels almost double our emissions, why aren't they taking the refugees, Corey? The exterminist doctrine assumes that we can know before the fact which humans are surplus and which ones might have the insight that lets us sequester carbon, cure disease, or store renewable energy at higher densities. Answering this question is simply a matter of looking at who files the patents in all of those fields. Back to the article, quote, "But eco-fascism isn't an entirely new phenomenon. Pastoralist and environmental thinking has always harbored a strain of white supremacy. The Nazi doctrine of Lebensraum was inextricably bound up with an environmental ideology of preserving habits of excess people, as well as the wrong kind of people, whose inferior blood made them poor stewards of the land," end quote. You know, until they received millions of dollars from an open borders donor, the American Sierra Club, yes, the far lefties in the Sierra Club held similar positions. In the 1960s, the Sierra Club initially took an anti-immigration perspective. They believed, accurately, that immigration would lead to exponential uncontrolled population growth, which increases resource consumption and environmental impact. They held an anti-immigration perspective through the early 1990s, but something changed in the mid-90s to early 2000s. That something was Mr. David Gelbaum. In 1995, he told a Sierra Club official that if the club took an anti-immigration position, they would never get a dollar from him. Then, in 2001, he donated $101.5 million to the Sierra Club. The following is an expert from the Los Angeles Times. Gelbaum, who reads the Spanish-language newspaper La Opinión and is married to a Mexican-American, said his views on immigration were shaped long ago by his grandfather, Abraham, a watchmaker who had come to America to escape persecution of Jews in Ukraine before World War I. I asked Abe, "What do you think of all these Mexicans coming here?" Gelbaum said, "Abe didn't speak English that well. He said, 'I came here. How can I tell them not to come? I cannot support an organization that is anti-immigration. It would dishonor the memory of my grandparents.'" I'm not going to say the Sierra Club was basically bought out in the late 90s and paid off to abandon their anti-immigration position by Mr. David Gelbaum, but I cannot stop you from thinking that if you choose. The connection between eugenics and environmentalism runs deep. One of the fathers of the eco-fascist thought is Madison Grant, who worked with Teddy Roosevelt to establish the U.S. system of national parks, and also to establish a whiteness requirement for prospective U.S. immigrants. This thread of thinking, that there are too many people and the wrong people are breeding, carries forward with the environmental movement, with figures like John Tanton, who started his career as a local Sierra Club official, but went on to found the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and co-found the Center for Immigration Studies, warning Americans against a coming, quote, Latin onslaught, end quote, revealing himself to be a full-blown white nationalist who is revered today as the ideological father of the eco-fascist movement. Today, the eco-fascist movement is closely aligned with the Trump administration through links to Stephen Miller and Jeff Sessions. The former executive director of FAIR is now serving as Trump's Immigration and Citizenship Services ombudsman. And Coulter demands that Americans choose between either greening or browning their future. Richard Spencer wraps white nationalism in green rhetoric, and Gavin McInnes has directly linked environmentalism to anti-immigration ideology. That last part is a laughably paranoid suggestion that eco-fascists are closely aligned with the Trump administration. You'll notice that Dr. O doesn't make an effort to counter the primary assertion of what he would call eco-fascists, that importing millions of people will increase domestic resource consumption and increase the need for wildlife destruction to build new housing. He doesn't counter that argument because he can't. It's objectively plainly true. This article then amounts to little more than a wow, just wow tweet, stated over 900 words. What I found important, though, is that clearly right-wing environmentalism, nationalist environmentalism, is something the left is deeply concerned about. If they weren't, they wouldn't be writing concerned articles about it. He knows the environmental right is correct about immigration, but he cannot tell you that. The left recognizes that most Americans do care about the environment. They want to protect natural spaces and wildlife and clean water, but they don't want to engage in economic seppuku and turn in their V8 engines. Thus, environmentalist nationalism, America First environmentalism, is appealing to people. Blame China and India for the trash islands and rising sea levels. They're the ones causing those problems. You cannot care about the environment and support open borders. Those positions are antithetical. You cannot support the environment and call for the subsidization of millions of people that otherwise couldn't support themselves through foreign aid. The billions we spend on foreign aid could go to cleaning up our environment right here, or better maintaining public lands. The left wants to take away your cheeseburgers to buy carbon credits, and much of the right object to environmental protections as runaway statism. As an American nationalist and environmentalist myself, I know we can do better, or at least I think we can. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think, but the solutions I propose, things like ending immigration, ending foreign aid, shifting away from consumer culture, these solutions are too illiberal for the left and too anti-capitalist for much of the right. That's always how you know you're onto something.